Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Sound Decisions here on Passion for Sound. And in this episode, it's part one of my interview series with Zach and Bevin from ZMF Headphones, or ZMF Headphones if you're in America. Zach and Bevin were kind enough to share about 90 minutes of their time with me, and we covered lots of ground. So as always, I'll break this interview into multiple parts. And as makes sense, we're going to start with a discussion around where they've come from, what their history is, what their design philosophies are in terms of how they approach the products they make, and why they've set up the business that they have. And then in later episodes, we'll talk about things like what the production cycle is for a headphone from the time that Zach first has an idea through to when it's actually produced. We'll talk about how he tunes the headphones, tests them. We've got lots of great ground to cover. But in this one, the focus is really going to be about who are they, where have they come from, and why does ZMF make the sort of headphones they do. If you're anything like me, you'll get a lot of value out of hearing from two wonderful people in our industry, and I think this interview once again shows us, just like some of the other interviews with people like Gino and Sherry from Just Shelly Labs, Jason Stoddard from Shit, and Robots from Chord Electronics, all these interviews continue to reaffirm that we're in an industry and a hobby with some wonderful, wonderful people. Bevin and Zach continue that theme and are both great to talk to, but also very knowledgeable and willing to share their experiences and their stories along the way. And so I hope you'll find this interview as enjoyable as I did in filming it. One final point, of course, the audio quality and the video quality is going to drop off for this one because we're using webcam audio and a Zoom recording, so apologies for the slight drop in quality, but hopefully it's still going to be easy to watch and enjoyable to listen to. I'll step aside now and hand over to the interview with Bevin and Zach from ZMF Headphones.
All right, so Bevin and Zach, thank you so much for joining me for an interview here on Passion for Sound. This is for those that aren't familiar with Bevin and Zach. They are here as representatives and owners, I'm guessing, of ZMF Headphones. And so we might actually launch straight into it because I think the questions that others will have that don't necessarily know the company are probably similar to the ones that I have because I have limited understanding of your company. So should we just jump straight in and say, what are your origins as a company? And if you see me looking strangely off to one side, it's because I've got my notes down here to make sure I ask all the right questions. So what are your origins as a company and how big is the company now? You've got premises, is it out of your home, garage? Tell us a bit about the company.
You want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. I some people know this story because it's, I don't know, probably been covered in a couple places, but more or less I started modifying Fostex T50 RPs maybe back in 2009, 2010, and I made one for my brother in 2010, and then started, ZMF Headphones, and ZMF Headphones was the reason it was called that was because ZMF stands for Zach Bevin Films, and I was in graduate film school at the time. And so it was cheaper to do that so I could do my film stuff and my audio stuff under the same window and not have to pay for two LLCs at the same time. So yeah, I modified headphones for a few years, did the Fostex T50 RP thing, eventually came out with wood cups because I really wanted to make headphones out of wood the same way I was really interested in acoustic guitars and banjos and vintage golden era type instruments. And yeah, so that was the very first thing. I mean, I think I always think it's funny, Bevin's really the only investor in the company because she let me take a credit card out under her name because me being the film student my credit was really terrible at the time, and hers was better. And so yeah, she invested $15,000 of money in a credit line, which is paid off. So yeah, so she was our primary funder, and allowed us to get I did that when we were trying to get the wood cups made to try to get the stuff together to be able to make a few of those for the T50 mod. So that was the very early, and I did that, and I taught adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago. And I taught through 2015 and have been doing ZMF full time since 2015, mid 2015 after the first semester that year when I kind of had to make a choice, can't do everything. There's not time for everything. So that's the quick origin story. Anything you remember that was?
Just for context, the early days we were, when Zach talks about modding T50s, we were living in pretty much center city Chicago in a third floor walk up. I was in school, he was in school. And then at night he was doing ZMF. So, I'd work all day and then kind of moonlight in the office. I'd hear, things getting thrown into the wastebasket and potentially some curse words.
Stupid T50s.
As he was sort of figuring things out and getting really into modding, we had no employees at that time. I didn't work for the company. It was just Zach sort of, learning about modifying headphones. There were little incremental changes when he started doing the wood cups. I remember us like running down the 3 flights of stairs with cups into the alley to, wipe them or to spray them, because we couldn't do it in our apartment. As we grew, we moved into a house, and we chose our house because it had a sizable workshop area. And we started, having people other than, we would hire our friends at first for odd jobs to come over and sort of like cut materials while they watched TV and hung out. But then it really formalized and became, okay, we need employees who we can train. We need to develop a standard operating procedure. Flash forward to today, we have a number of employees. We're in a commercial facility that we purchased and renovated into a, I think pretty state-of-the-art headphone facility. And, over that span from Zach starting to where we are now, there have just been so many like slight changes, and every time you can upgrade or every time you can make it better, that was always our course. I used to want the never stop improving slogan. I think it's like Home Depot or something like that. We can't use it, but that's been our sort of path over the last couple of years.
Fantastic. That's great. That's I think a really nice introduction to the brand for those that aren't, like myself, aren't as familiar as others might be. That's brilliant. One question that jumped, 2 things that I wanted to say. One of them was apologies that I call it ZMF because obviously being in Australia. So hopefully you guys don't mind hearing it as ZMF. The other thing I wanted to ask you, and this is probably a question for Zach, I'm guessing, the transition away from the T50RP, those Fostex drivers, because obviously you weren't the only one doing that. Dan Clark Audio went down the same path where they started there and they're now doing their own bespoke stuff. What was the trigger point for you in letting go of whether it was Fostex or anyone else, letting go of those existing headphones and modifying and instead saying, you know what, I can build a better headphone if I start from the ground up? What was the turning point there?
Yeah, the real turning point was just realizing that taking a headphone apart and putting it back together after making a few hundred of those or 1,000, or I don't know, we made a lot of T50s, and you're also giving into the innate, the gifts and the issues that any other manufacturer's headphone brings. And so you're kind of, at the mercy of that headphone. And so over time, I realized that, if I wanted to have something that was my own, as well as easier to make, that was, I was also able to build a business around. Because at the end of the day, modifying another manufacturer's headphones, you just can't really make money or a business that's going to grow that way. And, as I looked at it and thought, hey, this is something I'd like to do for a living, it's taking up all my time already as it is. If we want to build a business and be able to, do this as a full-time job where, not just a side hobby, I had to do it as a proprietary thing. That being said, the artistic side of me as well, when you're doing anything, you want to bring your own unique voice to something. And the only way to do that is to really design each part from scratch, from the bottom up. And, being able to do that with the driver and the parts and, make the entire thing out of wood, and the chassis, and, really tweak things and get them to where it can be a stable product and know how it goes together. It was a totally different learning process than modifying a headphone, because you have to make it work and then make it work in a consistent longevity. And one thing that was really important to us was making the product modular so that, not only could we build it, but, someone down the line, 10, 20 years down the line, if they want to replace a part, it's not going to be something that's impossible to do because the headphone's built in this, unique manner where you'll never be able to get the parts again or something like that. Which is, kind of what allowed those instruments from the 20s, 30s, 40s to last. We'd like to think that people will use our headphones for a long time.
That's really nice to hear. I think, particularly in today's world of disposing of everything, that's a nice piece to hear. And I personally hadn't kind of registered. I know some brands kind of put that really forward in their marketing. That's one of their big things, but I hadn't registered that with your stuff. So it's really cool to hear that. Now that we've kind of gotten a bit of an introduction, let's start talking more in depth about headphones. I'm going to start with a general question, and I probably should mention that these questions, I think I probably told you guys on the emails that these questions are almost entirely from channel patrons. So blame them for anything.
You gotta keep the patrons happy.
That's it. So so this is just
they're good questions though too.
They are. I was impressed.
Excellent.
I was very impressed. I thought, I don't need to do any work anymore. I'll just hand it over to the patrons. They can do all of my preparation. It's fantastic. So I've sort of ordered these in a way that I think will take us on a bit of a journey, and we'll probably end up, you might answer 2 or 3 in one go at times, and that's fine. We'll just make our way through them. But to start on a really general one, one of the questions that came forward is just, what are the most common questions that you guys get about headphones, or particularly your headphones?
I do think because we came from sort of a modding perspective, we've developed a lot of ear pads to help influence the sound of each one of the headphones that we build. And oftentimes we get questions about the different ear pads, what influence the material has on the ear pads, from, lambskin to suede to protein, and the shape. So that's a pretty common question, is people wondering about the ear pads that are offered and how they influence sound and might bring a headphone closer to a preferred sound signature or further from. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, people always want to know about the wood density. Mm-hmm. They always want to know how the ear pads will affect the listening experience. They want to know about the materials and how those affect the listening experience. People always are interested to hear about if they're going to hear a difference between models. Does the Atticus and Icon look similar? Do they sound the same? How do you compare the different models each other? And of course, we get questions. Can you compare your headphones to Focals or Sennheisers? And I'm always like, I don't know. They sound different. Sure. You can't really answer those questions, but yeah, those are the most common things, and we try to take care of most of that on the website. There's always updating to do, but we have a wood section of the website, we have an ear pad section, and there's always questions on there that we need to, reference to more and stuff like that.
Cool. And I think also sometimes it's also, some people are happy just going to a website and reading a website, and other people want to actually hear it direct and maybe in different words. So there's always going to be that mix, isn't there?
Yeah, you do our between emails, website, someday audio shows. You'll get the gamut of
the full story. Yeah. Another question that came up, and I was actually wondering if we were going to get this as the first question, hence why they're back to back. What's the backlog like on orders? Do you have a sort of a back order log and basically making to order, or these days do you actually carry some stock and you're more able to meet the demand directly?
Well, the dream and the plan for the last few years, and we were getting pretty close before the pandemic hit, was to have the stock headphones actually be, in stock, but we just haven't been able to get there. And part of it's the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, we were getting close to realizing that dream of ours, but I was working by myself for about 7 weeks from March through end of May last year or so. And that, set us back a bit. Mm-hmm. And then we got our staff back and everything. And that's still what our preference would be to have the stock headphones in stock. And I still tell people the stock headphones will ship a little quicker than the limited editions. And then the limited editions take a little longer. And part of it's that the stock headphones, you can plan further ahead because you're not going to be changing up part of the product, halfway through a run or anything like that. And so, yeah, the backlog is still, I always tell people 6 to 12 weeks. And I know that sounds really non-specific, and it is. And it kind of purposely is because it gives us a window to where we can say, hey, when you ordered, your headphone was either machined or being machined. And, and then we honestly have been doing a really good job of making sure that, I think most people right now are getting their headphone within 6 to 9 weeks. Most, not all, we do our best, but, so yeah, we have a pretty good backlog. I always feel like we're catching up, but, with the pandemic and everything, headphones have gotten more popular and we've continued to grow. It's hard to say in correlation to each other, what has affected what, because we've grown every year since I've started. But yeah, someday we want to be stock headphones, ready to ship, limited editions, a little longer. And then if we're ever able to get that completely under control, more custom options and a custom shop type of stuff, but we're just not there yet with that type of stuff. And yeah, we've expanded through all of it. As far, I think you asked about the size of our shop and everything. I mean, we have about a 2,500 square foot space here. We have our own machine shop that actually works in correlation with JDS Labs, where we have our own machines that cut our own wood and everything. And then we have, we just hired one more person. So we're at me and Bevin plus 5 people here every day. So there's 7 of us here every day. And then there's 2 part-time people, so up to 9 sometimes here. And then we have their 2 machinists down at St. Louis JDS Labs. So there's 11 employees total, and we're slowly growing.
I think that's really helpful in terms of giving people a sense of what to expect. And I think, at least for me, coming to a brand such as yourselves, I think you expect a little bit of a lead time, and you understand that if it's a handmade, well thought out product that's not just being stamped out of plastic or sheet metal, it does make a big difference. So yeah, I think whilst I understand some people might struggle with the 6 to 12 week window, I think most people, and it'd be interesting to see, do you find most people are comfortable with that, or do you find you get a bit of discomfort from people around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people know our story before. Audiophiles are some of the most informed people, and they, rarely would make a blind purchase like one of our headphones. So I think people come in having done their due diligence, like read up on what to expect when they're expecting, and have completely come in knowing that they're getting a handmade product from a small shop. When people check in, it's often just out of excitement. It's like, hey, I know we're not quite at the window yet. I'm really excited for my headphone to come. And, we're excited too. So it's not really a problem, but we do try and give more of a large range where we can under promise and over deliver. Yeah, where we come in a little faster than we say we're going to, rather than the other scenario where, somebody's saying, oh, you told me it would be here 3 weeks ago, and it's not. And what we've learned is that setting expectations is really helpful and important. So. Yep.
We're going to backtrack a little bit to one of the things that we spoke about before now. The provision of all the different pads that you do have, what led to making that available? So I guess another way to look at this is, why not have a pad that produces a sound for each headphone that you prefer, and just go, that pad belongs to that headphone, that's the best version of that. And if I think about my own experience with the Atticus that I had on loan from one of the patrons, for me, the Atticus was best with, I think, the Icon pads from memory. I can't remember now which. It wasn't the stock pads, I know that. And when I changed it over, I'm like, oh, okay, now I really love these headphones. Whereas before I'm like, yeah, they're good, but they're not amazing for me, for my tastes. So, I mean, maybe I've just might have answered the question, which is everyone's going to be different. but what's the reason for going down the path of saying, here's a whole lot of different pads to choose from versus this is the way this headphone is intended, like it or don't like it. And obviously if you don't like it, there'll be a different headphone that you probably like more. What was the reason for doing it down the multiple pad path rather than just focusing on a single sound for each headphone and stopping at that?
What? Sorry, before we go ahead, what ear pad did you end up with on the Atticus?
Atticus, I think it was the Icons.
You ended up with the Icon pad. That's the one you liked the most?
That's the one I liked the most. I'm gonna go and check that now in my review notes. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the Icon Velour was the one that I really liked.
Oh, so you like the Icon? Suede.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, so what I found with audiophiles and just humans in general is that we're all unique and have varied tastes, and a lot of those aren't just based on, experience, the nature argument. A lot of them are based on our actual anatomy and, how we are just made as different people. We all have different hereditary markers and all that stuff. And also, a lot of that has to do with how we hear things, past, the distance to your pinna and your earlobe and how everything is. And, if you ever go around and just look at a bunch of different people, I know this is something most people do, but if you go look at a bunch of people's ears, you'll be like, man, ears are so different. You just look at so many different people's ears and you're like, gee, I didn't realize. And, it's not something you realize until you start doing it. But, I challenge all the viewers out there, go look at 10 different ears today. I'm just kidding. But that you'll realize when you do that everyone is very differently built just in anatomy. And that's not even taking into account how old you are, how loud the volume you listen at, what your hearing damage is or isn't, how hairy your ears are, how clean you keep them. There's just so many characteristics. And so what I realized was that for each headphone, having a more neutral middle ground and then more bassy ear pad, which you can kind of find on the product page on each of our headphones on the site, will not only run the gamut of this headphone's spectrum of kind of ZMF suggested sound, but having those three things also correlate with the distance the ear is from the driver, along with a slight change in the room size of the ear pads, meaning the ear shape of how big or small the ear opening is, will give most users, not all, because you can't make everybody happy. You have to say something. You have to have a mission statement with each headphone, but you can have a small window with what you're trying to do with each headphone. And for example, you listen to the Atticus, it's our bassiest headphone, and the stock pad we send is the bassiest one. And you'll notice just about all our headphones, we usually, except for the O-Tour, I think, send the headphone with the bassiest ear pad on it. And we do that purposefully because it allows the user to kind of, I've always found mentally it's easier to go from bassy to neutral, where if you start neutral, your brain is going to have more of a problem with adjusting the bassy versus the other way around. And so it allows us to have that kind of gamut. And, whereas it sounds like you kind of had that experience where you probably started off with a pretty bassy pad and then got the Icon Suede pads and you were like, oh, I like these a little more. I think this kind of more neutral Icon Suede sound. And so hopefully that kind of explains the line of thinking behind everything. And ear pads are also just an easier way to change that, range of sonic experience a little easier, I think, than changing frontal damping, which you can also do, or changing other aspects of the headphone, or making people add in other modifications or something like that.
That's great. And I really like the idea of what you said before about moving from having just a single headphone, but then going into that idea of here's the range we recommend. I think that's great because it is still a case where you're saying to the end customer, this is what this headphone should sound like, but within this ballpark. I recently reviewed the Aeon 2 closed from Dan Clark Audio, and it was actually one of the things I said in that review was they're using that front damping material where you get the different felt and foam pads. And I felt like it was too much choice. I felt like by the end of it, I just wanted them to say, this is how it's meant to sound, and then let me decide whether I like it or don't like it for my own personal tastes, because it was like every track I'd listen to it and go, oh, maybe I just need to put in a different foam pad for this one, it'll sound better, and then I'd go to a different track and go, it doesn't sound as good now, better change the pads again, the internal foam that is. And so it was like, by providing it with so much choice and a system that was kind of almost encouraging regular changes, it was too much. Whereas I think the idea of saying, here's a headphone, choose it with the pads you think are going to be the best for you, and then kind of not learn to enjoy it, but hopefully it's going to just say you either like this headphone or you don't, based on what you're getting. And there's a little bit of room for tweaking, but there's not that confusion of 5,000 different options that you can tweak this and tweak that and plug this in and remove that. So I think that's a really nice way to do it. I like that philosophy.
Yeah, we also, and I've thought about doing this down the line, but with the Auteur and the two Verités, and not with the other headphones because they don't come with two sets of pads, but maybe it's something for us to think about is just, if your headphone, because the Auteur and two Verités, they come with a singular set of pads. This is how it comes. You can choose your secondary pads, but it's going to sound this way no matter what, which, maybe is something for us to think about with the other models, is saying like, like those, the Auteur and two Verités, maybe the Atticus Icon and Alice, could do the same thing, because, it is easier for a new owner to say, okay, I know what the stock sound is and now I can tweak it. Whereas if that stock sound isn't defined, maybe it's a little harder to.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Grasp.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something for me to think about. Something for you to think about.
It's always the journey, isn't it, with a product, making product decisions and brand decisions, which way to go. Like I know Shit Audio sometimes get criticized for their Thunderdome approach, where they'll put those two products out, see which one sells more, and then stick with that one. But these are all decisions that you guys have to make, isn't it? You've got to work out what's right for the customer, what's right for you and your production cycles and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I
Part
mean,
of the fun.
Part of when we got started, for example, the Atticus ships with an ear pad on it called the Ori, which is completely confusing. I mean, it should be called an Atticus pad, in
Good
theory.
point.
But when we started off, we weren't really thinking about what makes sense, or, we weren't sitting around with a pen and a paper saying, we're starting a business and this is like the logical way to do things. We have since sort of refined our thinking to go forward with products like that, but there are some eccentricities within ZMF from our origins.
Yeah, which is a bit of fun. It keeps a bit of history in the brand, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And
That's
the
great.
insiders know, somebody will be like, oh, it's an Ori pad because there used to be the Ori. And, so that's kind of fun too.
Yeah, I like it. That's good. While we're talking pads, are there any particular kind of combinations that you see sell the most? Like obviously, and I'm guessing, forums, people chatting about it on forums and reviews and whatnot. Are there any that are really commonly they go together, or is it a pretty varied spread that you get of combinations?
Definitely the Alice with the Universe Suede perforated pads. Those have developed a real strong following. People on forums kind of espousing their love for that match, and it is a really nice sound. Other headphones, B2 pads, we kind of had those as like a secret hidden menu option for a really long time. And then they slowly but surely kind of got out to a few people as Zach chatted through email. And then there was such sort of demand for the BE2 pad that we loaded it on the website, and it goes on both Verité closed and Verité open mostly, but those have become quite popular.
Yeah, I've kind of been pushing the Universe pads, even though people haven't caught on to them too much for every headphone when you want to make it more neutral. So like the Auteur, more neutral Universe pad, Atticus or Icon, and Universe pads, I called them that for a reason, because they are really a middle ground of sound for most of our headphones, and most headphones in general. They work well on like Hi-Fi Mans or Audeze or Bayer Dynamic. So I've been trying to suggest them more, because they work well on a lot of things. They're slightly angled. They're kind of a medium distance from the driver. So
That sounds interesting. I might have to look at getting a pair of those to try, because I've got a few iPhones floating around these days, so I might have to look into that one. That's an interesting one. I wasn't aware of those.
Yeah, we'll send you a care package.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Excellent. I can do a bit of a review and
put it in DHL. You'll have it in 2-3 days. Yeah.
If only. That's great, because I do mix things up occasionally and do things like pad reviews or earphone tip reviews and stuff like that. So I think it's nice to not just always be headphones and DACs and amps, but also get into some of the slightly off the fringe stuff. I think is interesting to those that want to tweak what they've already got. So that'd be great. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.